national parks, national monuments, and we're bombarded with evolution, old age. And can we have an alternative? So we're starting to do that. We're writing road logs for national parks and national monuments. And the first one was the John Day Fossil Beds National Monument in North Central Oregon. Why North Central Oregon? Because these three guys live in North Central Oregon, so that's why. So they started it there. It's a small spot, but they spent $8 million to revitalize it, teaching people more about evolution and how the fossils change with time. There are lots of fossils, but this is viewed from a creationist perspective. We also did it for Yellowstone Park just recently, and I joined their effort in this. And we're doing it for, right now we're working on one for Grand Canyon, and we hope to do another one for the channeled Scablands. And we're going to catch Zion and those parks down there here in a year or two, and try to do more and more so that people have alternatives. By the way, these road logs are half-page. They have a spiral binding where you can turn them all the way around. They're in color, so you can hold them while you're driving, and you're not going to damage them. Well, no, the person in the passenger side is supposed to hold them. But we're doing this right now, so you can find some samples of them down at the book table. And I might add that I bring this book along right now, is I think we need to examine our assumptions when we do models. I and John Reed, Carl Frody, and John Woodmarape examined plate tectonics, and we find tremendous problems with plate tectonics, and we summarized it in this book right here, which I wrote about half of it. Lots of problems. So when you think about the problems in plate tectonics, I asked the question, what about catastrophic plate tectonics? And I don't want to get into that because I get myself into a lot of hot water, but you can examine some of our reasons for being skeptical of plate tectonics in that book down there. So that's the end, and I thank you. And I don't know if there's questions and answers here. Okay, so yes.
What was the climatic conditions of Shinar and Babylon and Persia and, say, the Eastern Med, Palestine, Egypt, and all that? Well, this is all going on. Did they get close enough so that the Bible writers would even allude to it or mention it?
Please repeat the question.
Okay, he's asking, what was the climate like in the Middle East area, right? Well, first of all, where the Bible was written. First of all, I don't think they're going to see any ice sheets or ice caps. So they're not going to talk about the Ice Age. But right after they left the Ark, they ended up in Iraq, current Iraq, which what you hear from the troops, it is so hot there. Who would want to live there right after the flood? Well, you know, it probably was a pretty good spot right after the flood, because if you had cooler summers and warmer winters, and you're down in that deep Tigris-Euphrates area, it was probably a really great climate with a lot more rainfall. And we have lots of evidence that there was a lot more rainfall in that belt around 30 degrees north. Saudi Arabia, I think I see evidence of channels, in the old channels. The Sahara Desert was once wet. And so it was a lot better of a climate. And there's a statement in Genesis, which maybe can be used as evidence for a wetter climate, where it says that where Abraham and Lot were looking down into where Sodom and Gomorrah were, down in the Dead Sea area, and they talked about it. See, what is it? I forgot the verse. Chapter 15, where it was well watered or something like that. I forgot the verse. So that could be evidence. Now, some people think they had irrigation, and that's what you were talking about, but I don't know. I would lean that it was probably a wetter climate in the Dead Sea area. By the way, the Dead Sea had the evidence that the Dead Sea was a lot higher. That's another one of those areas where a lake was a lot higher at the Dead Sea. And that's probably why they found the cities of the plains, or likely the cities of the plain, at higher altitude, not buried by the Dead Sea, but at higher altitude, which I think is Sodom and Gomorrah and the other three cities of the plains up there at higher altitude, because the Dead Sea was higher right after the flood. I forgot what verse that is. They looked at it, it was well watered down there, and so Lot decided to go down there. So, did I answer your question? Okay. Did you find a verse for that? My Bible's right down there.
This is 13:10.
Okay. And Lot lifted his eyes and saw all the plain of the Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt as you go towards Zoar. So even Egypt was well watered. There's evidence for that, all this. So, yeah, thank you. So I'm not saying that's absolute proof, but I think it's pretty good evidence. So, yes?
Is 500 years really enough time to get so many mammoths in Siberia?
Oh, yeah. In my mammoth talk, I show what I do is what I did, and it's in my book. I looked at the reproduction rate, the gestation period, how soon they have their first calf, etc. But there's a lot of complications in all this. I don't know how many predators. I don't think there's probably too many predators for quite a while. But what I did is I looked at the doubling time of elephants in Africa. Some were doubled in 10 years. Some doubled as much as 25 years. If they double at 10 years, you can have billions of them in 300 years. It doesn't take long. So that's what I used. So there's plenty of time in a rapid ice age to get millions of mammoths. Good question. Good question. Yes.
You mentioned fires as being some kind of factor with the mammoths. I've never heard that anywhere else. Can you elaborate?
Well, if it's dry and windy, and the summers are getting warmer, there's not enough precip, I would think you'd have a lot of fire.